Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another exciting virtual tour experience with the city of Tacoma and your host tonight, Pretty Gritty Tours. My name is Chris Staudinger, and I'm excited to be here for this. I'm going to check in with you guys here really quick. As always, these are designed to be interactive experiences. So if you have questions, comments at any point, put them in the comments bar below. One of my favorite pastimes is when people find historical inaccuracies in the things that I've said, or if I'm reaching for the answer, there's always such a wonderfully supportive community out here where someone knows the answer and puts it in the comments. So please have fun with it tonight and interact with one another. But it's good to see you guys. I'm glad that you're all here. And tonight is an exciting tour. It's part of our partnership with the city of Tacoma. And we have several of these tours lined up throughout the year, but our inaugural one here with Black History Month is of Black institutions in the city of Tacoma. And I think before I get too deep into anything, it's important to distinguish kind of the line that I had to find between Black institutions and Black history in the area, where they overlap on the Venn diagram and not just divulging too much. I could probably have like a 3-year history course just on Black history and Black heroism in the city of Tacoma. But tonight we're focusing on Black institutions. And if you're curious what gives me credence to this, I'm glad you asked. So before I began this expedition, as I do with all of my tours, I reached out to experts and authorities on the topic to make sure that every piece of information I had was lining up with something. And in this particular case, I reached out to the Tacoma Urban League. And Tacoma Urban League has been active in the area for a long time here. Their mission is to essentially assist the African-American community in Tacoma and other underserved urban residents in the achievement of social equality and economic independence. And if I'm not mistaken, they've been around for 50 years. They might be coming up on 51, 52 here pretty close. But they've been around for a while. They are a known institution and they're movers and shakers in the area. And this is a fun story. I don't think I blush very easily. I don't have like stars in my eyes very often, but I reached out to the Tacoma Urban League really early on about this tour, and the president of Urban League was up until recently Tawana Nobles. If you're not familiar with her, here she is. She was an educator here in the city of Tacoma. She worked for Stadium High School, then Lincoln High School. She's been on the board of the University Place Washington School Board. And most recently, she was the president of Tacoma Urban League. But she was just elected to the 28th legislative district in Washington state as a state senator. And I knew this. I'd been watching the election. So when I sent the email off to Tacoma Urban League, and like almost instantly she emailed back, I lost my mind. I'm not going to lie. I was a little giddy about it because she is without a doubt a hero of mine. And she just wrote back to be like, we appreciate you guys reaching out. We're very interested in what you're talking about. We'd love to help you out. I'm going to defer to my staff. And the subtext, I assume, was, I'm very busy right now. But the fact that she took the time to personally write back was huge for me. I'll probably print out the email and frame it. I'm not even kidding one bit. If you're not familiar with the incredible things that she's done in the area, she is a huge activist, a definite mover and shaker. I think most recently, one of the projects that she spearheaded with her team was to ensure that during the pandemic, all of the youth in the Tacoma area had access to laptops so they weren't getting left behind during this era of digital learning. So pretty fantastic, definitely a hero, very excited. She even signed the email. I mean, digitally, but you know, it's a big deal. Anyhow, Tacoma Urban League, like I said, is an institution in the area, and they provide a variety of services. If you go to their website, you can find out everything that they do, because it would be difficult to encapsulate in a brief summary here. But like I said, they're they're activists for social justice and change, trying to help the underrepresented communities in Tacoma. And of the services that they provide, business coaching, consultation, and advocacy are big ones. And they also help with family well-being and the essentially like family planning status with people, helping to make sure that children have advocates as well, and that people have access to resources in the city of Tacoma if they might not otherwise have them. So they're really, really champions of social justice, and we're lucky to have them. And their recommendations were the foundation for our tour tonight of Black institutions. So there you go. Citing my sources already. 2021 is coming up, all solid gold. So to give you some historic context, because of course it's me, we got to go all the way back to George P. Riley, pictured here on the right. He was the first African-American resident of Tacoma, and way back before Tacoma was anything more than just I guess like a brief spot of speculation and the hope that there'd be a railroad here someday. He really came out to the area and gambled hard on it. And as a speculator, he got 67 acres in what was called the Alliance Edition, and really started to put money and infrastructure and hope into the city of Tacoma when there were only 73 people living here, other than, of course, the Puyallup. And he continued a really active life as an orator and someone who was very well politically connected and was really trying to help advocate just this better world. As an abolitionist, he had very strong opinions on the place of the Black American in this new expansion westward. And so the development of the Alliance Edition was a big deal in Tacoma. Today, we know the Alliance Edition as Hilltop. And for those of you who aren't in the Tacoma area, Hilltop, as the name suggests, is on top of the hill. This is a map for it here. You can see that red line section there is the entirety of Hilltop, really as we know it today. It's abutted by Stadium District, which is that northern end of the red line there on the Wedge District, and encapsulates Wright Park as well. So big area, huge deal. I think the next big sort of institution that arrives to the city of Tacoma is arguably the Buffalo Soldiers. Now, the Buffalo Soldiers are a huge part, I think, of American history that often gets underrepresented, but they were originally the 10th Cavalry, which was an all-Black regiment right during and then after the Civil War. And they had a huge amount of impact in our area, actually. Two of the things that really set them aside, or set them apart, I guess, is that they continue to operate as an all-Black division past the time that they were formed. And second is that they were really, I guess, essentially the first park rangers in the United States. Before there was an official federal park ranger role, the Buffalo Soldiers were the guys who were chosen to be the caretakers of these new federal lands that were being scooped up and changed into national parks. Another big part of the local history is that just south of the Tacoma area, where Joint Base Lewis McChord is now, before it was even Camp Lewis, there were war games that were being executed out there by the Buffalo Soldiers on American Lake out there. And a major history advocate and social advocate is a woman in this area named Jackie Hook. And she is the curator of the Buffalo Soldiers Museum, which is actually right in the Hilltop District down here in Tacoma. So I could talk for days about Buffalo Soldiers. Really fantastic part of history. It was the 9th and 10th Cavalry at one point, and then they also had 2 infantry divisions as well. But here's a snapshot from war games that were being done out in the American Lake Division, and there's a movement right now to make that a historically protected area so it doesn't get turned into warehouses, and talk more about the history of the Buffalo Soldiers as a cavalry regiment of the United States military and what they did outside American Lake. This is Jackie right here. If you have the opportunity to check out the Buffalo Soldier Museum, it's a really well curated experience there. Jackie's father was involved with the Buffalo Soldiers, and so she had this passion project to curate all these artifacts, and there's just tremendous amounts of things in there. It's a very small building, but just dense with history. Currently, of course, pandemic has limited what can be done with it, but I'm hoping that we can have a virtual experience with them. We were in talks with the Buffalo Soldier Museum before COVID really hit about doing sort of a joint experience together, and I'm hoping that that's something that can be done here in the near future. So check them out online. They've got a lot of great stuff on there, and then look up the Buffalo Soldiers as well. You'll be glad that you did. But it wasn't just the Buffalo Soldiers in the area. There was also USO Dance Hall number 2. Now, before the desegregation of the military, there had to be 2 separate USO dance halls so that the black divisions of the military had their own place for recreation. And this building, if it looks familiar to my local 253 Tacoma people, this is the Odd Otter building. And you can see it when you go there today. The upper level still has the military insignia stamped into the molding up by the ceiling here. This building operated for a very long time as the USO Dance Hall. Eventually, after the military was integrated, there was no need for this anymore. And then I think it became an International Harvesters building after that. But the legacy of it as a black institution remains very popular. And one of the things that is a great source of pride for the community is that Dory Miller had one of his last drinks before being killed in action in the Pacific. And he was here. He survived Pearl Harbor. He came, I think he was stationed in the Bremerton area, happened to be at USO Dance Hall here in Tacoma, and then shipped off again to the Pacific. So really incredible photos here. In fact, this one, I'll blow it up a little bigger for you, is from 1947, and that's Orson Welles on the right. And Orson Welles was, aside from everything else that he had going on, a very outspoken advocate for desegregation. And so he was actually a guest here at the USO Dance Hall Club number 2 in downtown Tacoma, like I said, back in 1947. So when we're looking at other institutions here, I think the military really is pivotal. It's one of the major driving forces to the black community in Tacoma's history, because not just the railroad coming to the area, but far and away the vast majority of the black community that became a part of Tacoma's history really arrived here due to the military. And that continues to be the case even to this day. Even if you don't know Tacoma, our close proximity to Joint Base Lewis McChord really makes it a desirable location for people who have been stationed here to sort of come out here. And if they've never been to the area, they usually fall in love with it. And a lot of people end up setting down roots in the Tacoma area because we're awesome. You could take that to the bank. Here's another great picture of another fraternal organization. The International Order of Oddfellows was another very progressive organization, and originally founded in England, where there was a black American sailor named Peter Ogden, who in 1842 sought formal recognition from the British Grand United Order of the Oddfellows, was granted it, and then there were predominantly black Oddfellows fraternal organizations that cropped up around the country, and one of them was here in Tacoma. And so the long history of the African American Oddfellows organization in the area is very tied into it. They had close working ties with Charles Wright, who is a major mover and shaker for the city of Tacoma, and was very instrumental to the Northern Pacific Railroad being in this area as well. So you can see there's a foundation for these communities coming together and a long-standing legacy and tradition of predominantly Black fraternal organizations arriving here in Tacoma long before the rest of the country was even considering something like that. So it's an exciting part of Tacoma's history, I think. Talking about fraternal organizations, we have to mention Prince Hall. So I don't think I have a good picture of the Prince Hall Masonic Temple here in Tacoma, but across from St. Joseph's Hospital is this, it's the most unassuming building in the Hilltop area, probably. It's this windowless blue box with these doors that look like they're non-functional. It just completely passes by your radar, especially across the street from the grandeur of St. Joseph's Hospital. And then it's also directly across the street on the other side from the community center in Hilltop. But this is the Prince Hall Masonic Order here in Tacoma. And Prince Hall, pictured here, was an abolitionist himself and civil rights activist way back in the day. So during essentially the time of the American Revolution, he was really maintaining this belief that African Americans should have the ability to have their own Masonic hall as well. And they were not allowed to at that time. So he ends up, and very similar to the story with the International Oddfellows, he petitions the Grand Masonic Temple back in England, who eventually grant the charter to Prince Hall so that the Masonic temples could start popping up here in the United States with an African-American group to them. The first one, I'm trying to remember when it showed up, but for Tacoma, it was in 1907 that the first Masonic Grand Lodge Prince Hall version showed up here. The most contemporary one is currently this one right downtown in Hilltop on Martin Luther King Way down there, and has been it's the same charter from that original one that showed up here in 1907. Prince Hall is buried, this is his gravestone here in Massachusetts. He died in 1807, but I believe the Prince Hall Freemason groups have expanded outwards across the United States, and I don't have the accurate number on them, but I believe there's over 300,000 members currently, and while it's not exclusive, it is predominantly African American, and I think it is not only the oldest, but the largest African-American fraternity in the nation to this day. It's not just fraternal organizations, though, that really make up the Black institutions of Tacoma. I think one of probably the most recommended institutions that showed up on the list that came back to me from the Tacoma Urban League were actually churches. And the churches in Hilltop with the Black community have been pivotal since the dawn of this city, really. Anytime that you're doing historic research at all, which is a big thing for me these days, there's always a sidebar about how the Black churches of Hilltop have moved the social compass and barometer very intentionally throughout time here. They have been safe havens, they have been refuges, they have been places where people have gotten together to determine the future and the fate of their community. And as very active and tightly integrated social institutions, they've really been a big part of changing the history of Tacoma since the very beginning. So some of the ones that showed up on the recommended list, number one, this is Pentecostal Tabernacle. This building was built by Silas Nelson back in 1926, I think, but then over time changed. An annex was added to the church back in 1953, and then eventually it became the Althamar Memorial Congregation Church. And I think that happened in 1953, and then they took over the entirety of the building since that time. But since the 1950s, it has operated as this particular church right here, and they are one of the major social congregations in the area that really helps provide a social network for the people in the area. And like I said, time and time again, when you look at the major institutions that have provided direction, consultation, and aid to the people in the area, predominantly the Black communities of Hilltop, it's again and again the churches here. Which is a perfect segue into the oldest African-American church in the city of Tacoma, the AME Church, the AllenAME, which was the African Methodist Episcopal Church, if I'm not mistaken, was founded back in the 1800s here in Tacoma. But this particular building, they started to occupy in the mid-1990s, and they saw that there was a need for their presence in the Hilltop area. I don't think it's any secret that specifically in the 1980s, the Hilltop area had a great deal of violence and tragedy that was occurring inside of it. And the first people to respond to that and start to address that need and that conflict and try and find a way forward were the churches. And for AllenAME Church here, the decision was made that they needed to leave their historic location and then set down roots in Hilltop. So they're located right now on MLK, which would have been K Street originally in Tacoma. But now they continue their legacy as operating as this social institution providing for the community in the area. And again, it's not exclusively a Black church. They're inclusive and welcoming to all, but it is a predominantly Black institution that has been, curated and filled and motivated by the Black community over the years here in Tacoma. This is actually an institution as well that I would like to do even more on. We've got a list of places that we need to talk about, but I think this one's particularly interesting because this woman featured here was a major activist for the city of Tacoma. Her name is Dr. Neddy Asbury. She was a pioneer of the civil rights movement in the Pacific Northwest in the late 1860s up into the 1890s. And when she was here in Tacoma, she was constantly campaigning for justice, organizing protests, and was trying to get rid of the incredibly controversial and racist film called The Birth of a Nation. And The Birth of a Nation was being screened here in Tacoma. And Dr. Asbury was one of the major contenders trying to get rid of it from our fabric and erase that stain forever. She was very active with Fort Lewis at the time as well, again, bringing in that military history being important to the area here. And she held a PhD in music and taught music and choir in the Hilltop neighborhood, predominantly with the First African Methodist Episcopal Church, or the AllenAME Church that we were just describing there. So she was I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the first Black woman to receive a PhD in the United States. And here she was in Tacoma. So we should all be very proud. Both Dr. Asbury here and George Riley, if I'm not mistaken, have rooms at the McMinimans Elks Temple Lodge. For those of you who still aren't in Tacoma, much to your chagrin at this point, I'm sure, the McMinimans Elks Temple Lodge took this historic building from 1916, turned it into a wonderland of enjoyment. There's a music venue inside, there's a brewery, several restaurants, but the hotel rooms are all modeled and themed after parts of Tacoma's history. And so you can see these historic figures as you wander the halls down there. And I really appreciate that they did that. So I think another church institution that I'm very close to, I think in my own heart, but also one that has been pivotal to the area, is this building right here. It's currently known as the E.S. Brazil or Ernest S Brazil Multi-Purpose Building. But if you're not familiar with the story of Ernest S Brazil, he was a reverend who I believe started in the Bremerton area and then found his way to Tacoma and was a huge civil rights activist and this pillar of the community. One of the things that he was constantly trying to combat was just poverty in the area, and was really instrumental in making sure that there were infrastructures in place to help people actually have a ladder out of poverty, not just trying to paper over anything, but really giving people an opportunity to get themselves into a place where they could be fiscally responsible and start to create a life for themselves. And that was incredibly difficult for the Black community in Tacoma for a long period of time there, because there was a great deal of redlining that was rampant. There was not a welcoming community in the area. It was at the peak of the civil rights movement for a while there. And so the many incredible contributions of Ernest S Brazil are memorialized now, not just with the E.S. Brazil multipurpose building there, the church, but also there is a section of 12th Street which just mysteriously turns into Ernest S Brazil for a period of time, and then continues on his merry way as 12th. And it runs right through the Hilltop area there. It's one of my favorite pieces of random Tacoma history. It is a nightmare for postal workers or like DHL couriers, because if you're looking for Ernest S Brazil, but the map says 12th, it is a very difficult thing to find. Also, it's Brazil with 2 L's. And so you can only imagine how difficult that is for people just trying to deliver packages. All of these churches have connections with each other. They're not islands amongst themselves, but very tightly connected. And this brings me to the Tacoma Ministerial Alliance, which, for my own sake, I constantly call the Justice League of Black Reverends. They are like constantly out in the community, very much in Hilltop, looking for ways to improve and secure and create opportunities in this community out there. And they are some of the snappiest dressers and most just like genuinely kind-hearted people out there. And some of the things that they've been responsible for recently, here's these good-looking guys right here. So these are some core members of the Tacoma Ministerial Alliance. Let me give you a close-up here. In Mr. Mac. Now, if you don't know Mr. Mac's clothing store in Hilltop, it is without a doubt one of the pillars, one of the major institutions of the Hilltop community. Mr. Mac opened the shop, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think when he opened up, a very long time ago, and was famous for selling these brightly colored, impeccable suits. He was a haberdashery. He had hats. He had accoutrement. You could really get dressed nicely there. And another thing that really set him apart was just the fact that he was this major humanitarian. When he died in 2017, rest his soul, I think one of the stories that percolated through the community the most was when this grieving couple entered his shop and were trying to buy suits, trying to buy a suit for a funeral. And when the time came that they were looking for a suit, they realized that they couldn't afford anything in there. And Mr. Mack was like, just give him the suit. Like, you're going to a funeral, you've got enough on your plate. Take care of it. When he died in 2017, the fate of Mr. Mack and its place in Hilltop was really sort of nebulous. No one knew what was going to happen to it until enter the Tacoma Ministerial Alliance, my Justice League of Social Champions, and they purchased Mr. Mack and ensured that it will remain as it was, as this pillar in the Hilltop community, and that will stay there for as long as they can feasibly see it through. And I think that's a huge part of what they do, is maintain this place for the community to continue to exist in Hilltop. And with rampant gentrification in the area, that's definitely something that's forefront on a lot of people's minds. So I commend them for all their work. Another place that was on the chopping block is closely tied to this fantastic photo. So pictured here is Ed Taylor with 2 of his beauticians, whose names I have not been able to find. But if anybody knows, let me know. Actually, someone's telling me right here, Alice Burns. That's incredible that someone knew this. Alice Burns is on the left, and Willie Mae Harris, I believe, on the right there. And this is at the opening of Ed Taylor's Barbershop, which was opened in 1969. And it was revolutionary because it was for both men and women. And this was right on 23rd and K Street. And here's one of my favorite pictures. This is with Ed Taylor showing electric hair clippers, which were very new at the time, back in 1969, to a skeptical guest here. But Ed Taylor's Barbershop was a huge part of the community to Hilltop for a very long period of time there, but it wasn't the first one in the area. Sam and Terry's Barbershop, I think, is just ubiquitous to the Hilltop story. And it was founded in 1958 by a guy named Sam Daniels and his associate Larry Terry. And it was the first Black-owned barbershop in the city of Tacoma. And it was revolutionary. And it became so much more than just a barbershop. This was, it was a major source of information and community for the Hilltop area. I was going to say until ... but it continues to be to this very day. And the barbershop was on a period of not knowing what was going to happen to it there. It was taken over by one of the sons of this particular company, and he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to continue running it. So enter the Tacoma Ministerial Alliance yet again, and they purchased Sam and Terry's and made sure that it was going to stay central in the Hilltop area there. I'm going to put up quotes from people who are reminiscing about Sam and Terry's, because some of them are fantastic, and you can really see that it is one of the major institutions for the Hilltop area, and providing so much to the Black community, not just in Hilltop, but Tacoma for a long period of time. And again, going through the resources on it, the thing that people mentioned was that there was a source of pride in it, because as the first truly and independently Black-owned barbershop in the area there, it was a haven, and it was a beacon of something that could be better. Especially in 1958, it was very much at the forefront of its time. So the fact that we still have it as an institution here in Tacoma is tremendous. And I'm glad that someone stepped in to ensure that it will still be preserved out here today. I've got one more here. So this is Sam Daniels. Sam is here on the right. I think this was taken in 2013, and he passed away in 2016, just 1 year before Mr. Mack did. And so it was a dark time for the Hilltop area. But he opened this with his business associate, Larry Terry. And I believe it was Sam Daniels' son who took over Sam and Terry's. And, life throws different things at you. And so he really endeavored to keep it open as a true labor of love. But he was quoted as saying it was a blessing that the Ministerial Alliance came in and purchased the barbershop, and so it continues to operate today. So when we're looking at these institutions, Black institutions in the city of Tacoma, you may have noticed a through line here that the majority of them are in the Hilltop area. And I'm going to share a link to this fantastically curated website, which goes through the history of the Hilltop area, but also talks a lot about the redlining that was going on in the city of Tacoma. And Hilltop became, not just because it was the first area that the African-American community was established in Tacoma, but it became one of the only places that people could continue to buy houses and find a safe place to live. And as a lot of the Black community was redlined out of Tacoma, a big part of that being on the West End, which we're going to talk about, I think, next month, Hilltop just became the area where the Black community of Tacoma found themselves. And so all of these major institutions, it's not just a coincidence that they're in the Hilltop area, but it's part of the fabric of this story from the very beginning, from the Alliance edition started by George Riley in the beginning to now, that there is a haven and refuge in the Hilltop area, which is why topics like the gentrification of Hilltop area have become really at the forefront of a lot of people's conversations just in the last few years. So if that pops up more and more in some of our virtual tours, that's the reason why. which is an excellent time to bring in another one of the highly recommended Black institutions here for the city of Tacoma, the Tacoma chapter of the NAACP. The report that I received when the NAACP website was going up at the time here was that it was pretty extraordinary. The Washington state doesn't have a really high population density of African Americans, and so the NAACP found this pocket, I guess, in the Tacoma area, and a big part of that, like I was saying earlier, was this flocking of people from Joint Base Lewis McChord up to the Tacoma area. And in 1914, Tacoma got its own chapter of the NAACP, and the Tacoma officers successfully lobbied the state legislature to stop the passage of a law that was banning mixed race marriages in the state of Washington. So the legislation that would have stopped mixed race marriages was halted by the Tacoma chapter of the NAACP. Not to give them exclusive credit, but it was the spear tip that really saw that through there. So a lot of really interesting Black history found itself creating a genesis and branching outwards from the city of Tacoma. And I think that gets looked over so frequently in the stories that are told out here. Also, they were instrumental in a lot of the civil rights movements that were happening, not just in the 50s and the 60s, but onwards. And so the mission of the NAACP, which was begun after a deadly race riot, rocked Springfield, Illinois, really sort of sees this continuation here in Tacoma. Another big institution that drew a lot of support from the NAACP was the Black Businessmen Association, which was started in the mid-1900s by this fine gentleman right here. This is Charles Walker, who owned a series of Exxon Mobils here in the city of Tacoma. And it was his sort of brainstorm that came up with the idea that if you were really going to find a way to create a successful Black business community, you had to do more than just give financial contributions or donations, but really set up almost a system of mentoring and advocacy. And it was his idea to create the Black Businessmen Association here in Tacoma. And it was for both men and women, actually, and create this support group. And his belief was that if you had a support group that could come together and lift one another up, but also provide expertise and guidance, that you could see a really strong, successful network come out of that. And he was absolutely right. And it's that same fundamental philosophy that has driven the success of the NAACP here in Tacoma, but also institutions like the Tacoma Urban League. If you go to the Urban League website, one of my favorite things about it is that it clearly lays out the resources for people. So if, like I said, if you're looking for help with family planning or management, if you're looking for help as a small business owner or prospective, hopeful small business owner, there's all these great resources for you. Also, they have a list of Black-owned businesses in the area, which you can sort through based on what you're looking for. So they're just a tremendous resource for the city of Tacoma. And, you know, if you're looking to answer the questions that might be jumping into your own head or bring support to the Black community out here, Urban League is a really great opportunity to sort of jump into it there. Which brings us to the Black Collective. I don't think I could possibly do this tour without addressing the Black Collective. They arose out of Tacoma's civil rights struggle in the 1960s, and it's a volunteer leadership organization, end quote. And they are dedicated to addressing social issues affecting the Black community of Tacoma and Pierce County, I guess, in general. But it started as the Concerned Black Citizens in the immediate aftermath of the Mother's Day disturbance of May 11th, 1969. Now, if you're not familiar with that particular moment in history, after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., there was a march and cry for representation and, just addressing the change that needed to happen here in Tacoma. And based on which historic text you're reading, it's either the Mother's Day disturbance, the Mother's Day march, or the Mother's Day riot. But that crucible of need and desire for change prompted the Concerned Black Citizens, which now is known as the Black Collective here in Tacoma. And I don't know if you can see some of the major players of the Tacoma community represented here in this photo, but they are there. The Black Collective has continued to operate in conjunction with the NAACP. Reverend Ernest S Brazil was a major player in this organization. Tacoma Community College, OB Society, just so many of the people, the Ministerial Alliance, which I can't stop championing again and again, have all been players of the Black Collective, and they are definitely one of the major representational Black institutions in the city of Tacoma. They also have a fantastic website that really goes through what they do and what they provide for the community. Pictured here is former mayor, the late, great Harold Moss. He was the first Black educator in the city of Tacoma. He was the first Black superintendent for the city of Tacoma. He was the first Black council member for the city of Tacoma. And then, yes, you guessed it, the first Black mayor for the city of Tacoma. And he was very integrated into the Black Collective throughout its entire history. In describing the organization, he has a great quote here that I want to give you guys. And it's, "The great strength, endurance, and influence of the Black Collective is not its structure or lack thereof, but it's in the autonomy and commitment to the mission of empowering and bettering the conditions of the Black community." As an institution there in Tacoma, I think it is perhaps the most representative and all-encompassing of Black institutions here in the city today, and addresses the various needs of the community here, but also celebrates the tremendous accomplishments and rich history to the area. And that's something that I really want to emphasize with this whole thing, is that a lot of the change that has happened in this area has been because of the Black institutions of Tacoma. It was because of these organizations petitioning to have, interracial marriages, to have Black representation on the police force in Tacoma, to have community infrastructure and social services and social justice, that these have been made possible. And then on an even more human and ineffable level, places like Sam and Terry's Barbershop, having these truly Black owned and operated businesses that have become a part of the narrative for the Tacoma community. It's fantastic in a way for me that's difficult to describe in words. So that is, for me, I think the best introduction that I can possibly give you on the Black institutions for Tacoma. I would say if you're looking for more information, there's tons of resources, but please reach out to Tacoma Urban League, check out their website, look at the Black-owned businesses in the city of Tacoma, and then also look at the Black Collective. And then if you want to get more involved, consider a lot of the churches in the Hilltop area, because they're constantly doing things like not just social advocacy and justice programs, but scholarships, community cleanups, things like buying institutions to make sure that they don't get erased from the fabric of the city, and so much more. So there's a lot going on out there. You have the opportunity to get to it. I'm not guaranteeing that you will get a personal email from State Senator Tawana Nobles. Not everyone's that lucky, but there's always the possibility. So dream big, my friends. If you guys have questions, please let me know. Put them into the comments. I will do my best to answer them. And if nothing else, I can always direct you to the right organization that can give you a better answer. But moving forward, we have a tremendous amount of exciting tours coming up here. Next month, we are doing the west end of Tacoma. And then after that, we're going to be doing an exciting, I guess, murder mystery extravaganza for the entire month of May, which will be your opportunity to get involved and solve the mystery. So look forward to that. If you enjoyed your tour tonight and you'd like to tip your guide, you can always do so on the homepage of prettygrittytours.com. Not necessary, though, because all of this has been brought to you by the city of Tacoma. Thank you guys so much. I'm looking forward to our next virtual experience together. Until then, my name is Chris Stottinger, encouraging you to keep on exploring. Thanks, guys.